Um, There we go. Cool. So tonight with us is Robin Wauters, the founder of Tech.eu. We know each other for a while already. We encounter ourselves on conferences most of the time. That's where you live, kind of, right?
That's where I meet anyone. Really.
So Robin, before we start, can you maybe describe yourself and your work to set the scene so we know why you're sitting in this chair?
All right. So these days I describe myself as a European technology journalist and researcher. So basically my specialties is the European technology industry, meaning startups, innovation, policy, but mostly the ecosystems in Europe is sort of my field that I research through data, but I also cover through stories, podcasts, newsletter, whatnot. But yeah, I've been in journalism for about 12, 13 years, but wasn't trained as a journalist. So I studied marketing initially, and then just wound up in the tech field and startups and got a huge interest, and here I am.
Yeah, it's an interesting field anyway. So you've been an editor of TechCrunch actually in the very early days, then the Next Web. How did you actually roll into this scene?
It's actually a funny story because as I said, like I wasn't trained technically, so I'm not a software developer or engineer, but I studied marketing, and I just ended up at a tech company. The first step of my career was actually in Locristi, so not too far from here was a company called HostBasket. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but so it's basically hosting and domain names, and I was in sales, like in first line account management, basically.
Oh, really?
Taking call. That was my first job, right? But it was interesting because people would register domain names, and I would get an interest, like why would they register? And I saw like the first wave of web applications. This was 2003, 2004, just sort of after the .com bubble burst. But then there was a new generation of startups, which I ended up calling Web 2.0. And I started blogging about these startups pretty early on, but mostly from a marketing advertising perspective. And I just got really into blogging and writing, and sort of didn't call myself a journalist, but becoming more and more professional, or at least proficient in blogging, getting to know people, etc., either online or offline. And TechCrunch was a really funny story, by the way, because I was working for the Next Web as a freelancer, and I remember they were paying me 250 euros a month to do freelance blogging for them, because it wasn't a business back then, right? And I was doing it on the side. I was actually a partner in a company called Oxynate. We're going to talk about that later, but they're based in Ghent here. And I was just doing this on the side. And then at some point, I don't know if you know a lot about TechCrunch, but the founder of TechCrunch, his name is Michael Arrington. He's a very, very
I've met him once.
tough. He's a very arrogant, push people kind of guy. And he sort of, I broke a story about some startup on the Next Web, and he just pinged me on Skype, hey, who the fuck are you? And I'm like, well, my name's Robin, I'm from Brussels. Yeah, whatever, you work for me now. Here's your login and your password. You start tomorrow. And that's the whole story.
Way more, I guess.
And I asked him, like, do you have any editorial guidelines? That, here's your login and password. And I started blogging for the TechCrunch the next day, and I stayed for 4 years.
Cool.
That's the whole story. There was no recruitment. There was
full
no
time, or?
Yeah. So that was not in the beginning. Because I was doing Plug at the time. I was doing a conference in Brussels about startups as well, but mostly full time, and that's 3.5 years at least full time.
And then you joined the Next Web again afterwards?
Yeah. Well, TechCrunch was acquired by AOL, and then people started leaving, and then Michael Arrington was actually pushed out by Arianna Huffington, because they also bought the Huffington Post, and there was a power struggle. He lost, and I sort of followed suit, but I didn't really know what to do. Well, I don't know anything else outside of blogging. So I just went back knocking at the Next Web, like, do you need anyone in Europe? I'll do your European coverage. And they said yes, and I rejoined the Next Web.
Cool. And since then you have founded Tech.eu, what you're doing today.
Yeah, which is the other story that people don't know. I actually got fired from the Next Web a year and a half later, it's not my fault, I like to pretend. But basically they changed direction. Like they were writing about startups a lot, but then they sort of wanted to become the next Mashable, talking more about, the internet culture and
that's
memes.
That's what they're doing today as well.
Yeah, sort of like going after traffic rather than, deep stories. And I sort of got fired because of that, because I didn't fit into the picture anymore. And then I had two choices: go back to TechCrunch or some other publication, or start my own. And I ended up doing Tech.eu.
But that was it the only reason, or did you already had something like that in mind before you started?
I was kind of already annoyed that nobody was really covering Europe
Properly?
deeply enough, properly enough, for my taste, because I saw a lot happening. It was also, this is 2012, right? It was almost, well, it is 5 years ago. There was already some movement. It's gained a lot of momentum since, but back then you can already see the sort of ecosystems maturing and some startups scaling up, and I was annoyed that nobody was really paying attention to this. It was kind of a side note in all the big publications, going from TechCrunch to the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. Nobody was really interested in Europe, but I was, and like there was not a single publication was serving my needs as a audience. So I figured I might as well do it myself.
Yeah, sure. I remember the early days, like really the first articles was very interesting to see it growing. Did you always imagine that it would be what it is today, or did you really have to change it?
No, I had no idea, because we started sending this weekly newsletter,
Yeah,
because
that's
I was covering all these deals, right? Like this startup in Slovenia is raising funding, and this startup in Lithuania that you've never heard of got acquired. And I started listing them in a weekly newsletter, and that became one of the biggest things today. But I didn't know that was going to happen. There was no plan or anything.
I look forward to the newsletter every week. So.
Thank you. Thanks for subscribing. Please subscribe, like, comment, and retweet my stuff.
He just tricked me into paying for it, so I have to get a subscription. So you're also involved in a lot of other initiatives in Belgium, like for example the Be Central, which is like what is it? A startup ecosystem, kind of co-working.
I have no idea how to describe it. It's sort of a mix between community / co-working space / they also sort of want to be a magnet for all the organizations, like Startups.be has its office there, Allied for Startups, which is like a lobbying organization for European Commission. So it wants to sort of become a melting pot of, physically bringing people together that would normally not be.
That's a cool location. They're in the main train station in Brussels.
If you've ever been to Central Station in Brussels, you have the hallway and the big sign with all when the trains are departing and whatnot. You look above and there's windows, and that's basically what it is. It's 2 floors above. Okay. So we have 3 floors total.
I've been there, but I never knew it was there.
Yeah, you can see that's actually the cafeteria. But
okay. How do you find the time to do all this stuff?
It's just very simple, because it doesn't take me any time.
Okay.
And Be Central, they basically asked some people from the ecosystem, do you want to be a shareholder and be sort of an ambassador? And my first question was, do I need to do anything? And they said no. So I invested, but there's no operations involved.
Cool.
I'd never go there even. So I support the project fully.
It's funny because you have an office like 500 meters away from it.
I prefer that one, because it's more quiet. So Be Central is a big success. It's only been a year, right? So when it's a huge hit. There's like a shitload of people doing coding, education at Le Wagon. And as I said, the organization Startups.be and all that, and it's working out quite nicely, and I'm very happy for them. But for me, it's too buzzy, too busy, too noisy.
It's a real co-working, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So, what drives you to do that instead of just focusing on? I mean, you're coupling your name with an organization like that. So, what really makes you do that?
Sort of 2 answers to that question. One is that I was asked, but I was asked by our deputy prime minister. The co was a very big champion of the project, also put in his own money, by the way. So he asked me, because I was working for his cabinet at the time, to find ways to stimulate entrepreneurship in Belgium. And I thought it was a good idea, and I just got involved and I support it. The other answer to that question is that that's basically my passion, right? So seeing how startup ecosystems develop, how they flourish, how they differ from one another, how they're similar, how they can, because an ecosystem is a lot of things, like it's a lot of elements, but you always need sort of a central place where people can come together and have physical meetings.
Yeah, of course. So you already talked about it, but in 2008 you organized a conference, Plug, it was in Brussels, right?
Yeah.
Tech conference in Belgium. You did it once only?
No, 3 years.
Okay, why did you stop doing it?
No time.
Okay.
No, I was working at TechCrunch at the time. They were doing a conference called TechCrunch 40 at the time in San Francisco, which became Disrupt, and they almost acquired it. They almost made Plug their European
TechCrunch Plug.
Yeah, but it was too soon. It didn't work out, and then, TechCrunch at the time, by the way. Like spent 4 years there, but that was 15, 16 hours a day. It was a completely intense.
That's what you get with Michael Abrams.
Yeah, exactly. He pushes people to the limit. He pushed me to the limit, which is a great thing. I learned a lot, but there was no time for anything else.
I can imagine.
But Plug is an interesting story because it's also born out of frustration. Because back then you didn't have that many conferences in Europe, but you had this big one called Le Web. And Loic, so the founder, is a friend of mine. He started Le Web, basically inviting his friends from Silicon Valley to fly over to Paris to talk about Silicon Valley and then fly back to Silicon Valley. And I thought it's such a silly thing because we have so much talent in Europe. Why don't we put European speakers on stage and European startups? So it was kind of a confrontational conference, if you will. I only had European speakers. It was a rule. I only had European startups in the pitching competition as a rule. So I kind of wanted to create a European version of Le Web. That was my goal.
And it was you only that organized it, or was there a team behind it?
No, it's just me.
Okay.
Yeah, which is crazy if you think about it, because now, like Web Summit is 160 people, I think, full time.
160,000, yeah. Oh.
No, it's like 160 people staff, right?
Yeah, they're huge.
But this is full time. When they do their events, they even hire a lot more as freelancer or temporary. They're huge organization. I did it on my own, and it was profitable from the first year.
What?
Usually they say you lose money on your first conference, you break even in the third, and then by year
I thought maybe it was because of financial reasons that you stopped doing it. But
no, not at all. No, it's actually quite successful. I mean, but I don't like it. I don't like doing events. I like going to events. Organizing them it's a hassle.
It's a pain, yeah.
I don't like the logistics part of it.
It's a business on its own, right?
It is. It can be a very good business. I'm not saying that, but it wasn't me.
Patty did a good job, right?
Patty did a pretty fucking amazing job, I would say.
Cool. So next week in Belgium there is Supernova. Are you somehow involved with that?
Not very much. I'll be the MC for the second day. So I get hired quite a lot to do like interviews on stage or to moderate panels. I was sort of involved with Level Up in Ghent, and the guy who was doing Level Up in Ghent, Bruno, got hired by Jurien Engels to do Supernova. So he sort of brought me back into the fold. We work with them to promote the event. I support it personally, but I'm not involved in an organizational capacity.
So I'll see you there, I guess.
Yeah, it's the same with Ant Festival in Leuven, by the way. We also help them curate. Because we have such a wide network, we try to get speakers for them to help them. But it's mostly just as a favor. So,
I mean, we as Made with Love, we've been in the business for 10 years and we originate from the European start, I guess. So when did you think that the European startup scene really started to like kick off?
So I'm interested, why do you say it started 10 years ago?
For me, it feels like that. I don't know. Maybe it's because...
Oh, you do have a point, because 10 years ago there was at least a wave of entrepreneurs that you now see getting their first success, like SoundCloud and Adyen and Spotify even. Like, these are like 10, 11, sometimes 12 years ago.
We were like really on all those conferences with those people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember going to the SoundCloud opening party, like 6 other dudes in an apartment in Berlin. Because nobody cared, right? But there were already startups, for sure. But there wasn't really an ecosystem to speak of. They didn't talk to each other. There was no community. There was no exchanging best practices. There was no conference, as I said.
I remember the conferences in London, thinking of their names. I remember. The guy from Treehouse.
Yeah, Future something.
Yeah, the Future of the Web or something.
Yeah, I know who you
FOA, that was the name.
FOA.
Future of Web Applications.
Future of Web Apps, yeah.
Ever been there?
Yeah, of course. You had those kind of conferences, but they were not about startups. They were, as I said, like we were
development oriented.
It was very, very technical. It wasn't inspirational. They weren't like showcasing interesting startups or interesting people. So that was lacking. But there were startups. There was just not really a scene or an ecosystem.
That probably also makes that you have a lot of connections with those people very high up in, like for example, Alexander Leung, the founder. I also know him because one day we were at a conference just drinking beers and he was standing next to me. Yes. Yeah,
it's funny to see like all these.
But you see those people now, like they're in Facebook or wherever they are, and it's funny to
Yeah, it's funny to watch.
So I think it was the start from like what.
At least the new generation it was. Yeah.
And what about Belgium? Like when did it really get off the ground here?
It hasn't yet.
Can
I say that?
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, in fairness, because I travel so much, it's very hard to keep your finger on the pulse in Belgium, at least for me, because like sometimes a company will raise like 10 million euros and I will read about it and I will say, wow, I've never heard of that company. I don't know the guys behind it. And I don't even know the investors. So that for me is sort of shocking and embarrassing, if you will, but it's at the same time it's normal because
it's also, I mean, it's it's a bit more popularized, if I can say.
Yeah,
So
It's become,
everyone, it's like in the I don't know, I'm not very good with years, but in the 90s, everyone wanted to be Nirvana. Then in the zeros, everyone wanted to be a DJ, and now it's like I want to be a startup founder, right?
Yeah, it's become kind of cool to be an entrepreneur, if you will.
Okay.
But I mean, there are interesting startups and there's interesting stuff happening, but I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about it. I'm just saying we have.
It's hard to keep up with everything, of course.
We have a lot of work to do.
How do you do that? Like, how do you get all this information?
We source it from.
Do you go in like national registers and stuff?
Yeah, we do because we also keep a very close database. Because part of what we do at TechEU is we create reports. So we do research, we sell them to corporates, policymakers, academics. But to gather all that data, you have to scan public sources, which is easy. I mean, anyone can do it. If you really want to have like pan-European coverage, then you have to start digging into public records, getting information straight from investors, that sort of thing.
Cool. Do they call you when they close a new deal?
Some of them do. Yeah. We don't always write about them. Sometimes it's on background.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, and has tech or journalism in general changed in those years since like 10 years ago?
Yeah. So what I was doing at TechCrunch was basically they would send you a press release and you'd try to become the fastest just
to publish it.
To copy the vital information, and then you would publish and then you would edit and just write some opinion and you would go to the next story, which was fun for a while, but it's a bit of a drag, right? So it exhausted me completely. So after 6 years of this, like the Next Web and TechCrunch, I got tired of it. So we no longer do these quick news. Well, we do, but not me. Yeah. So I hired people to do that for me. And now it's more like opinion, more of a deep dive, more data-driven analysis, which you need to take your time. But that goes against everything that sort of they've been teaching you. If you want to be a successful website and you want to be a big publication, then you have to be fast and lots of clickbait and headlines and sensation and slideshows. And I said, fuck that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go the other route. And it's proven to be successful, but we probably could have been a lot bigger if we wanted to, but it's not something I shoot for.
I don't know if a lot of people know that TechEU is also like all the reports and stuff that you guys write.
Yeah, we don't advertise it too much. A lot of the research, by the way, we do doesn't even get published, so we do custom reports for corporates, but we also combine some of the things we use for other reports. So it's our core business, by the way. Yeah. People ask me like, how do you make money? Is it advertising? And it's like, no, we do advertising, and I go speak at conferences and get paid for it, but it's like combined maybe 15% of our revenue. The rest is research.
Is it only you that speaks or also the other people?
No, I'm trying to get my team to be more active so I don't have to travel as much.
Yeah, we really also like to do that. We try to do it. We give them public speaking courses and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I like traveling, but it's getting a little much sometimes.
Yeah, I know. Feel your pains. So you also did some smaller investments. So like you already mentioned Oxygenate, also Showpad, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
Yeah,
I haven't made any investments except for B-Central actually. I'm a shareholder of these companies, which is different. Basically, what started happening was because of TechCrunch, you started. I'm not saying you become an expert, and I'm not technically trained, as I said in the beginning, but you become sort of aware of pattern recognition, right? You see a lot of businesses come and go. So you learn a lot about business plans and how to talk to VCs and how to raise funding. You get to know all of these investors. So people in Belgium would come to me and say, can you introduce me to this guy? Can you make an introduction? And I would do that. Like for years, I would just, for free, just introduce you to anyone and help you. And can you look at my press release and as an editor, just get out the grammar mistakes and all that. And at some point, I got a bit tired of it. And I said, I'm just going to ask for equity, and then they'll all say, fuck you, and they'll go away.
And then 2 people said
but what started happening was people would actually be serious and said, why don't you come on board as an advisor? And you'll help us with our communication strategy and make some introductions when we need them. Showpad was the same. Like I knew the guys from Netlog. They started their company in the Pocket, and then Showpad was kind of a product of in the Pocket. And they were showing it to me like a very rudimentary version. I was saying, do you think we should spin this off? Should we talk to someone who can mentor us into like doing multiple products from the same company, and I introduced him to a few people. As a result, I became an advisor and a shareholder, which turned out to be...
Are you still an advisor today, or?
Well, I don't advise them anymore.
Okay.
I think they can afford
maybe.
actually intelligent people now. But I'm still a shareholder. Yeah, I sold some of my shares over the years because they raise rounds, so they always ask.
Mm-hmm.
The new investors always ask, like, you know, keep your shares, yes or no. So I sold some, but I'm still a shareholder.
And would you actually really go invest in other companies now?
Yeah, if I had money, probably yes, and I would probably lose all of it.
And
See, but the problem is, if you're an angel investor and you invest your own money, so there's two ways you can invest. You can invest your own money, and you can invest someone else's money. 99% of investments is someone else's money, right? It's LPs.
That's how VCs works, right?
It's VCs. So angel investors have a much harder job because one, it's earlier stage, of course. Sometimes a guy with an idea. So what they say is you have to make 50 investments, lose all your money, and then you get good enough to maybe make a good one. And I would make the worst investments because I get very passionate when people are passionate.
Yeah, of course.
And I would just because I'm not technically trained, I can't really judge if a product is, or a prototype of a product is going to work. I can sort of see if it's heading in the right direction towards the trend, the market, and if the team is okay. But I would just invest in anything.
Yeah, sure.
So I would lose a lot of money.
And
if I ever win the lottery, I'll become an angel.
And now it comes to mind, like, did you ever had a question from a VC to actually join their company? Because you have all the information that they need to make the decisions, right?
Actually, a lot of my peers have become investors.
Yeah.
So a lot of people I used to work with at TechCrunch are now successful VCs, and including Michael Arrington, by the way. I've never been asked, like straight up, like, do you want to join us? I've been sort of casually asked, but I don't think I would make a good investor. So
but the research, they also have to do a lot of research and all that stuff.
Yeah, I always tell people, like, the questions that I ask a startup as a journalist are basically the same
as a VC, of course,
as a VC does. But I can write about them and I can forget about them. A VC is stuck with them for 6-7 years if they invest, right? So.
I mean, if you would be a VC, what kind of selection criteria would you use for an investment?
The same as they all do. Quality of the team, ambition of the idea, size of the market, technically viable, which is sort of an obvious one. But it's such a cliche answer, though. You ask any investor, like, what makes you special? Oh, we only invest in great people with big ideas in huge markets. I'm like, yeah, that's what everyone else says. How do you really make a difference, right?
I think as a startup founder, if you go in for an investment, I mean, it's sometimes very hard to figure out who you have to go for.
Yeah. Well, if I'm really honest, if I would be an angel investor, maybe I would have looked at Showpad and not invested at all. Because you look at through different eyes, right? So if you actually have to put money on the table, that's a big... I don't know. The criteria are all the same. You always have sort of an interest in certain spaces, like artificial intelligence in this case, or VR, which I am very interested in. I would gravitate
VR, really?
Well, AR.
Okay.
No, what do they call it? XR. Mixed reality.
I mean, the thing that the Weather Channel did is pretty cool with the...
And also Rovio, the Angry Birds company, just did something on Magic Leap.
I haven't seen it.
They launched it yesterday or 2 days ago, which apparently is like incredible. You can basically like, the catapult thing, but like do it in
in the real world.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you would like place it on this table and you would like shoot. Anyway, it looks cool.
So you're traveling Europe all the time, right? I don't know if you go to the US often, but how do you combine it with a healthy family life?
I don't. I just got divorced.
Yeah, you just don't.
Fine.
I didn't know it when I was writing the question.
Yeah, fuck you. No.
Was it because of that, or was
No, there's always 1,000 reasons, but no, it's not easy. At the same time, like I don't go to the US often to answer your question, but I went to India last year. I was in Nairobi this year with the co. I went to Hong Kong and Shenzhen in July, because you got to keep sort of your eyes on where innovation is coming from, which, by the way, increasingly is not that much from Silicon Valley. But I travel a lot in Europe because you cannot cover Europe by staying in Brussels and sitting on your couch. TechCrunch Europe, to bash the competition, TechCrunch has a European team. There's 4 of them. All 4 of them are based in London, and 90% of their coverage is about UK startups. Sorry, that's not Europe. Yeah. So you have to get out of Europe.
You go to all the Baltic states.
Yeah, I do go to the Baltics quite a lot, and the Nordics in general. I go to Romania, Bulgaria, CEE in general. I went to Greece in the summer. Anywhere you go, there's something happening.
Yeah, of course.
And it might be from nothing to something very small, But at the very least, there's something happening.
Okay.
I find that interesting.
And do you think you'll ever get tired of traveling and flying?
I get physically tired, but if anything, I'm more addicted to travel than I've ever been.
Okay.
Because that's the beauty of it. I started TechU sort of because nobody else would ever give me the job that I do now. Travel around, meet people, talk to them, go out, have dinners, receptions.
Exactly what you're doing tonight, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, but it's also like, and this is not to brag, but I don't think anybody aside from me does what I do. Like try to map what's happening in Europe, even if it's mostly in my head. Nobody else.
Do you
is
get
really
a lot
doing
of
that,
questions
right?
from traditional news outlets?
Yeah. They contact me all the time. I'll have the reporters from Wall Street Journal. It was just in my office 2 weeks ago. They don't always know. Like you would be surprised.
Yeah, of course.
How little they know. I help them all the time. But because we also have our data, right? So.
You're kind of like the ghostwriter of their information.
No, I wouldn't say that. Sort of the Santa's little helper.
Yeah.
We provide them with data, and then they have questions. I'll just answer them. They either quote me or they don't. I don't really care.
And so, do you think that like the blogging, do you think you will always need it, or do you think the data providing will be your main business one day?
I don't think you can separate the two because a lot of the people read our stuff or listen to the podcast or get the newsletter, and it's like a funnel for us to sell the stuff that we actually make money on.
Okay.
So I don't think we can drop it.
It's kind of a marketing, inbound marketing way. Okay.
It is.
Cool. So we're at the end of the questions. So our last question is always like, if you compare the world today with 10 years ago, what do you think is the biggest difference?
I read these questions before, and that was the most difficult one. Because I always tell people, like, I'm not a futurist. People tell me, so what's going to happen in 5 years? So, well, I don't know. I can't tell you what's going to happen.
Yeah, but you know, like if you compare like 10 years ago when it was all like starting here in Europe.
Yeah,
like,
but at 10 years ago, I couldn't have predicted what's happening today.
Not.
So I don't know. I really don't. I think Europe has a bit of an edge when it comes to these really deep tech companies. Because by the way, we missed the boat completely. Look at the phones that you're using are not made in Europe. The operating systems that they run on are not made in Europe. The apps that you use are mostly not from Europe. The social networks that you use are not from Europe. So we kind of missed the boat.
We fell with like.
And everyone's always like, hey, what about Spotify? I'm like, yeah, there's exceptions to the rule.
Of course.
But in general, we kind of missed the boat, right? So we have to sort of acknowledge that and then just see what's happening next.
Do you have any idea why?
Well,
was it because the people all left to the US, or?
It's a big combination of mindset, bureaucracy, government, lack of funding, you name it. It's all of that. Talent was never the issue.
Okay.
Talent, technical developer and engineering talent in Europe has always been very good and strong. It's just everything else, like infrastructure, government, mindset. Mindset is a big one. The culture of wanting to start your own company in the first place, still not there yet.
Especially not in Belgium.
Yeah, no, it's a big problem in Belgium.
And do you think it will?
It's a big problem everywhere in Europe.
We're in a good way of changing that, or do you think it's still a huge effort that we need to take here?
Listen, I don't think everybody should learn how to code. I don't think everybody should want to become an entrepreneur. But yes, there should be a lot more focus on educating kids in a way that they're at least open to doing something of their own. Like unleash their creativity, whatever you want to call it. But start very young. Like, how do we get kids interested in technology in a way that's not just as a consumer or a gamer, or just not put them into silos, but like. But
not everyone should code, because that's what some people say. Like everyone needs to know how to code.
I don't agree, but I might be wrong. I've been wrong before.
Can you code?
No, not a single line. No.
HTML maybe?
No, not even.
Bold?
No.
Yeah. The B? No.
Whatever, man.
Okay, no, but
can you write? No.
Yeah, I do. Actually.
See? But it's a good question, and maybe I should learn. But I'm going to stimulate my kids to learn it, but not because I think everyone should code. It's just because it's one of these things that you need to try, and if you're good at it or you like it, then by all means.
I think it's maybe it's not important that everyone knows how to code, but they need to understand the complexity of the world that we're living in. Like that, it's not just appearing on the screen.
That's true.
Magically.
And learning to code also has other benefits, I think. Yeah. Like learning logical thinking.
It's like maths or Latin in school if you want.
Yeah, but it has benefits. I wouldn't know why people would try to block them from learning to code.
So
doesn't make sense.
The last question is, where do you think?
Wait, we're still at the previous one. So in 10 years.
No, that's
No.
That's the last question.
No, I was going to say something.
Okay.
So I think Europe now has an edge when it comes to deep technology.
Yeah.
You have centers like research centers in Zurich, in Munich, in London, Cambridge. DeepMind is a good example. The company I got acquired for $500 million. I'd never heard of that company. It was super frustrating for me. But then I started looking and said, where did they come from? These are like deep scientific, academic people that they're not from the startup world.
Mm-hmm.
They just create companies based on the science that they've developed in an academic institution, which is actually the way it should be, right? So we see, we don't have enough of that, but it's coming. There's a huge wave of people coming out of these R&D centers and good universities that are going to start the next big companies.
Okay.
And Europe has an edge when it comes to, I think, privacy.
Yeah.
And thinking about human rights and data usage and protection. And
Not everyone likes it, but indeed.
no, but listen, I was against GDPR 2 years ago when they announced it. I'm very much for it now.
Okay.
I think it's a really, really good thing for the citizens of Europe. I think it's also a good sort of a guideline for companies going forward worldwide, not just in Europe. I think every country should copy it.
Yeah, I wonder how long it will take the US to do something similar.
Very long.
Yeah, because there's a lot of services I use that just got shut down because of the GDPR, that they say like you cannot access it anymore.
Yeah,
Really crazy. And just use a VPN, go to the US, and they still have all my data, which is also illegal.
It's a clusterfuck. But I mean, these companies, they fucked up. It's a paper. Washington, no, it wasn't Washington Post, LA Times.
Mm-hmm.
LA Times is like you knew this 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So you don't want to. That's,
so what do you think you'll answer in 10 years?
I don't know. I honestly don't.
No.
I'm not even going to make a guess. I have no idea.
Okay, cool.
I can say that the European startup ecosystem in general is going to develop in a very healthy way. We see the data, right? So that's the other thing. You look at funding because you can only measure that many things. Like a lot of it's anecdotal, right? Mm-hmm. But what you can measure is the funding that goes into it and the exits, right? So which we do, and they all go up and to the right. You put them on a global picture, and then it's like tiny compared to US and China.
Of course.
But it's still going up and to the right. So I'm very positive about the European startup ecosystem, but slowly.
You mentioned China. Do you follow a bit what's happening there?
Very much. That was also the reason that I was in Hong Kong and Shenzhen but it's
because that's, for me, it's like a world I don't know anything about.
Well, you should. And I know a lot of people say that, but it's actually true because it's just the sheer scale of the things they make and the speed at which they do it. It's just mind-blowing, and it puts everything in perspective.
Is there good coverage and news coverage about what they're doing?
Yeah.
Can you recommend the website we can follow?
Tech in Asia is the
Tech
blog.
in Asia, okay,
Tech in Asia. One guy from TechCrunch called John Russell, who I used to work with at the Next Web, has a newsletter about anything that happens in Asia, not just China, which is very good. And then, the Wall Street Journal.
I know the US VCs are moving a lot into Asia, so that's.
Well, they've been doing that for years, right? But for good reason.
Yeah, of course.
And not just to have the Silicon Valley guys, come up with some hardware, have it made in China, and then sell it in the US.
And get it taxed.
That's the past, right? Now it's like proper collaborations, proper partnerships, proper US guys moving there permanently, or at least for like a prolonged period of time. I'll give you an example. You go to China, actual China, not Hong Kong, across the border, mainland China. I went into a coffee store and I would try to pay with credit card, and it would just laugh in your face, right? Because they skipped that step, right? They went straight from cash to apps. And if you don't have those apps, you're lost. And there's no credit cards, no cash.
I saw a video online this week of a kid that was paying with a watch. Did you see it?
No.
She was in a candy store and I think a 3-year-old. She had not an Apple Watch, but a Chinese watch, I don't know. And she was just like swiping, showing the QR code, paying, walking out of the store. It's really crazy.
Even homeless people with QR codes next to them, so you can donate money just by pointing your phone. No more cash. It's becoming a cashless society in a big way. So it's happening very, very fast. You can question the methodology. For example, all the facial recognition technology, what they use it for is questionable. The actual technology itself is super fascinating.
Yeah, that's true.
At that scale, I find that very fascinating.
Cool. So that's hopefully not where we'll be in Europe in 10 years, but who knows?
I think we might be the
In
opposite.
Belgium, they're on the good way with all their cameras and
Yeah.
stuff. So maybe if
Yeah.
someone hacks them and installs a facial recognition system on it, we're screwed.
Yeah. The hacking is a big problem.
Yeah,
All the
of course.
cybersecurity. And now with the whole, is social media a threat to our democracy and all that kind of stuff, that
The
scares
fake
the shit out of
news
me.
and
Yeah, it's not just fake news, but like, how do you prevent communities from posting anything and it's regarded as scientific fact rather than opinion? How do you it's a huge problem. I have no idea how they're going to solve it.
blockchain.
Yeah, blockchain.
Always a solution, right?
Yeah. Put it on the blockchain and everything will solve it. Do you want to talk about blockchain?
I always try to
Really?
get it into the conversations.
Okay.
This is my last chance.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like, I can't pretend that I'm a big expert on blockchain, but I've been following it for quite a while. I've also invested quite a bit in cryptocurrency, just out of interest to learn. But blockchain might be another field that, especially Eastern Europe and Russia, Ukraine, because I'm not saying they're all mathematical genius, but they've always put a lot of emphasis on mathematics in education. So a lot of these whiz kids are like, that's the first thing they turn to when they saw, we're in the outsourcing industry, we don't have our own startups. But now blockchain comes along, it's like, it's decentralized, it's global, we can do something, and you see a lot of them jumping on this and really building solid applications. But there's not that many use cases for blockchain.
The hype is a bit over right now.
For cryptocurrency, it is. For blockchain, not
Yeah,
at all.
blockchain is just on the starting point.
Yeah. No, that's not true. Blockchain is really just at the beginning of.
Cool. Okay. We are at the end of the prepared questions. Is there any
That's
other
fun, though.
questions from our tiny audience here,
Yeah.
or from the internet?
The guy over there.
Is anyone watching the Slack? Okay, cool. Jimmy, you have a question?
You've seen a lot of funding. Do you think funding is always the best idea for a startup?
No, absolutely not. If anything, if I show you the numbers that we have, like most of the exits of companies in Europe, technology companies are either acquired, go public. The majority of those have never raised a dime in funding. So no, you don't need funding to be successful. I will say, if you have an idea that can only scale through venture capital, then by all means, I'm not against it. I'm just saying you can do it without. It's very rare, and sometimes you just need to accelerate either development or block out the competition or expand into new markets really fast, and then funding is the only way. There's no other way.
Changed a bit there as well. Like in 5-6 years ago, it was easier to bootstrap it. Right now, the time to market needs to go faster.
It's still easy to bootstrap it. So what I always say, early stage funding is saturated, at least in mature ecosystems. If you have a half decent idea and you have a half decent team and you can't raise seed funding, then there's probably something really wrong with your business model or your product. It's become almost too easy. You have government grants, you have crowdfunding, you have angel syndicates, you have friends, fools, and family. Lots of opportunities to raise seed funding, so that where you used to have to bootstrap and then get to a point where you could raise a seed round or a Series A is sort of all blurred into. It's almost become impossible not to raise if you have a
for me, I mean, we work a lot with entrepreneurs, of course, and for me, sometimes feels like a goal. They want to reach money and they want to raise as much money as they can.
I feel like that's getting better. It was a big plague, a pest 5 years ago, roughly 5 years ago. And, for some reason, if we raise funding at this valuation, will finally be worth talking about or whatever. It's just.
Yeah.
It's all bullshit.
Cool. There is questions from the internet.
Questions from the internet. Yes, internet.
We have a question from Portugal, all the way from Portugal. The question is, what was your most sci-fi moment in China?
In China? I don't know if it was that sci-fi, but I would have sort of expected people in Shenzhen, the taxi drivers, to speak at least rudimentary English.
No,
they don't know the word hello. They just don't know any English. So speaking into Google and real-time translating what you're saying was sort of I know it's possible, but I'd never done it before because usually you just
Yeah, of course.
try to make yourself understandable to someone in another country. But there is like real-time translation through Google. So you wouldn't talk and then
Yeah.
it would spit it out. It was just like simultaneously while you
I
speak.
never
the
tried
real-time
actually.
It's fucking amazing. So that was a bit of a sci-fi moment. But I mean, you can use Skype for that now. Because
Yeah.
Microsoft actually invented some real-time translation engine that works really well. So you can basically talk to someone over Skype now, which I've never done, but in China.
And then they have they don't have Uber in China. I guess they have something else it's called.
Didi, yeah.
So I mean, when I go somewhere, I almost never talk with my taxi driver because I just enter the address in Uber and
Yeah.
I just start driving.
Yeah. Well, mine got lost. And
Okay.
then you're lost
You're
because you don't even know what it, what
Yeah.
if you don't have any Mandarin
Yeah.
skills, then you can just show
Yeah,
the
that's-
address right. I can't pronounce
and
it.
like navigating yourself in the city, like everything is in another language, which you absolutely don't understand.
yeah.
I think it's the same in Russia. Like
And Shenzhen is a bit of a special case because it was like a fisherman's village 30 years ago, like 30,000 people
that's
lived
where
there.
all the iPhone markets and stuff are, right?
Yeah, that's where Foxconn is and all these. It was sort of now it's a metropole. I think 30 million people live there now in 30 years. And it's all new, right? Everything is like parks and it looks polished, but it also feels a little bit like you're in sort of a twilight zone.
Yeah.
Because they built it basically as a fuck you to Hong Kong. China was kind of, okay, we'll give Hong Kong its autonomy, we'll make
And
it
then
like a
the
one country,
city
two
next to it,
systems.
right.
But we'll build Shenzhen like an hour away, mainland China. And it was just suddenly there. Well, not suddenly, it's like 30 years, but that's
I'm
enormously.
planning a crazy trip with my friends there over the New Year's closing.
In Shenzhen? Or-
Yeah, we want to do
Yeah.
some iPhone shopping and drone shopping.
I didn't like, I went to so in Shenzhen you have the consumers electronics
That's
market.
really crazy. That's where I want to go. Yeah.
It is an insane place. So you imagine a mall, but basically like square meter shops that sell
My friend was
everything.
sending me those PDF files that you can get
Everything.
from the owner with like the prices of
Yeah.
it's just every
Everything.
component.
From like
that you
nuts
can-
and bolts
Yeah.
to cables to adapters to
It's really
plugs to motherboards, everything.
Nice. You can go there.
And it's
There's
like
this
building after building
Yeah.
after building after building, one street, 10 stories high, you go back on an escalator.
That's where I
It's-
want to go. Yeah.
It's mind blowing.
You can go there and get all the parts and make an iPhone out of it.
And actually, I ran into a Belgian entrepreneur who's doing a hardware startup in Shenzhen, and she and her partner, that's what they said. Like, we don't particularly like living and working in China. It's not like it
Are
was
they
a dream.
the one with the battery thing? No.
Yes,
No,
yes.
yeah. What's it called again?
I don't
They have a
remember.
battery for MacBooks Pros, I think, that extends your battery
I don't
life.
remember.
No.
They had like an app first. They moved to Silicon Valley, and then they did a hardware startup in Shenzhen. So I feel like
You have to be
that's
crazy
sort of
to
like
do.
the
The first startup that Jonas and I, my co-founder, were in was a hardware startup, and we also went to China to get like the molds and everything. It was just so fucking expensive to get something started. And then one point in time, we decided we're not going to do the hardware, we're just doing an app.
see. That's what she said.
Yeah.
To start, like it's not.
It's crazy. It's really crazy.
You arrive at Foxconn, and they even had a deal with the Foxconn accelerator, and for them it was even like, if it's not like 10,000 units for a prototype, even we don't even want.
I
to
remember
talk to
making the mold was like 150,000 euros.
Yeah. But on the flip side, imagine if you do your hardware startups and you need anything. Oh damn, this doesn't. This bolt doesn't fit. You don't have to wait 3 weeks
Yeah,
for
yeah.
it to ship out of China. You go to this electronics market the same day. You come back and you have it
Yeah, that's true.
at the cheapest price possible.
Yeah. For us,
So it goes both ways, right?
it was very stressing because we were in Europe, or people would go there in China, and we were very afraid that they would make a mistake and actually get something built, and then we got all the units, and then it was not working or something. And you have very little control if you work with a Chinese supplier, which language is a barrier. And, Anyway,
And the other, like what I already said, like the fact that you can't use credit card in Hong Kong, fine. You cross the border, Shenzhen, it's like an hour and a half.
for me
right?
it was in the
No
US.
credit card.
Yeah, in the US, it was surprising to me. Like I was there in 2014, lived there for a while, and I was going to visit Yosemite, I think, and I was wanted to pay in a store with my credit card, and I was paying with swiping, like you have to do in the US, and then the terminal said read chip, and this lady was like going crazy because she didn't even understand what it was saying. I said like I have to put my card in the machine. She was like, it's not possible with this machine. I had to put it in and enter the pin, and she was amazed that it's something like that.
Yeah.
So even in the US, it's like they're like with credit cards they're behind, but then you have stuff like Square, and if you then compare to China, they also have like a huge leap to
Yeah.
make there as well. In Europe, contactless payment is like kind of
No,
common.
but they skipped that part. It's
Yeah.
all app-based now, right?
Yeah.
Because they do everything in one app. Like,
Yeah.
WeChat and
WeChat, of course.
WePay is like
Yeah.
90% of their life is controlled through that one app.
And Alipay, I guess.
Yeah, Alipay is like the
Yeah.
competitor, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's not. But at the same time, it's not just China. I was in Nairobi earlier this year, and they completely skipped computers. They went from nothing to mobile phones. So everything they
Yeah.
do, they pay their insurance, they pay their mortgage, they pay their. They have this company doing solar, energy, so you can
Yeah, yeah.
have like even a
We have an
radio and a TV.
ex-employee that works for a company that actually does
But they
that.
pay everything by mobile phone,
Yeah.
which for us is even. Imagine paying your mortgage every
Yeah,
month
I know.
with
it's crazy.
SMS. It's sort of nuts, but they skip those steps because they have to, because they don't have a choice. So.
Okay. Cool. Any other questions? Should we again?
Yes.
So you said you're a bad investor, but still any markets we should look at, or any countries or companies? I sold my cryptocurrencies now, so.
You did. Which ones were they?
No, I only had Bitcoin,
You don't have
but I
Bitcoin.
sold. I was in the money. So.
All right. I don't know. I always tell people, if you go looking for what's the best market or the country to launch in, that's probably the wrong way to go about it, rather than what can you do. What makes you special? Like, what kind of skill or passion do you have that would allow you to build a product that makes a difference? I know it sounds corny, but all this changed the world. There's very few products that actually end up changing the world. But if you can change your world, or you can change the world of someone you care about, it could be your partner, but it could also be a market or an industry or a sector that you care. Imagine that you come from a family of shipping, like a container industry, and you have a good idea in that market, then by all means, because you have the network, you have the knowledge, you can talk to people, then probably you should do that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the biggest market or the fastest growing. So it's rather what drives you, and then sort of based on that, what product would you make that would be different from everything else, and then is there a market for it, and it would go that way rather than the other way around. If that makes sense.
Makes sense. I'll have to do some self-reflection.
Yeah, reflection is always a good thing in general in life.
Any other questions? None from the internet? Cool. Tim, you have a question? You're raising your hand? No?
Just drinking.
Cool. Okay, thanks Robin for your time coming over.
Thanks for
Give me a hand.
thanks for having
Yeah.
me.
And thank you for coming and watching.
Toen u nog eens spreken of niet?
Nee.
Altijd wel tof om terug naar hen.